Hello and welcome to this episode of T-Tech. On today's episode, we're going to talk about getting started with NetBSD. I do hope you enjoy it, and let's get into it. Hello and welcome to this episode of T-Tech. So today we're talking about how to get started using NetBSD. So the first steps you want to do, first of all, you want to find a suitable desktop or laptop. So basically, you just want to make sure you have one that has enough RAM on there, has enough hard drive space, and, has the right architecture to use. Now, you can also run this on server-grade hardware, just as well. So after you've found something you want to use, and you can also use a virtual machine if you want to, you want to download the appropriate installer image for whatever you want to use. And after you get the image, you just want to take the image and put it on your install media. It can be a CD, DVD, or USB. And at that point, you just boot up your computer with NetBSD, you install it, and then you can even go further after that and install it at a desktop environment to make it easier to use. So, let me scroll down here. Okay. So before we jump into this, the pros and cons. Well, in regards to NetBSD, the pros, the first thing I think of anyway, is excellent cross-platform support. So the NetBSD kernel can run on many different CPUs and platforms, from a 32-bit x86 machine to SPARC 64 and into the ARM space now, the lower power machines. There's a lot of interesting architectures you can run this operating system on. So again, though, it is portability focused, not just in the platforms it can run on, but being able to use the programs on every platform, having the system calls work the same way, and having a lot of consistency. So it does have a very small footprint. You can install the entire system in about 2 gigabytes of space. Now again, you may want more because you want to add software afterward, but it is very good in how much space it takes up. It's very reliable for systems that need to be up near 100% of the time, Very good for that. And something interesting, the user land and the kernel are developed together. Now, this means that the kernel that operates the hardware and manages it, and the user land that utilizes the hardware by using things in the kernel, they make them together and they rely on one another. Now, basically, what it means for you and me is that it's a lot more stable, and you very rarely have compatibility issues because of that. As long as you're not mixing, different versions of software or something from other versions. Now, you also, of course, have excellent documentation. And that documentation is in the form of man pages, and they also have a guide on their website. It's very, very good read. And again, there is ease of use if you've used any other Unix-like system, either one of the BSDs or Linux. You'll catch on fairly quickly. And again, under all the different architectures, you still have consistent, pristine environments, even if you install from an ARM single-board computer all the way through to a server. It would be the same environment for you. Now, there's cons with this, obviously. First of all, it's probably not as well known. I would wager that you may have heard it maybe one time in your entire life, and that's how you maybe found this video. But anyway, you know about it now, so that's good. Now, there isn't as many ported applications. It probably goes back to it not being as well known, but basically applications like Firefox, LibreOffice, and other things like that get modified by developers and ported to NetBSD so you can install and use that application. Now, you'll find somewhat that they're not as up to date, but it's like that with a lot of the BSDs. It's just because it's volunteer with the port system. It's not a fault of the BSDs themselves. Now, hardware device support is a con, honestly. The wireless card support is going to be a little bit behind to about 802.11g. You're not going to have the newest lines of CPUs supported and things like that. But the thing is, it makes up for this by running on all those architectures, though. So what would you use this for? Well, you can use it as a firewall and router system because it has things like PF in there. It has their version of it, which is NPF. There's good firewall packages to use. You can use IDS and IPS software with this as well. You can set it up as a server. It could be a mail server, a DNS server, a web server, many of them for you. You can use it as a wireless access point with some wireless cards and have that replace like your Linksys or Netgear Wi-Fi. You can use it as a switch and or a bridge for replacing your switches if you want to. Again, you can also use it as desktop or on desktops or laptops. And you can also use it on single board computers. And also because it supports ARM, you have options there. Now lastly, before we get into the rest of it, the resources. So you have netbsd.org. That's just the main site. You have the About page. There's also a blog.netbsd.org. It tells you about what's going on with the project. And there's different sections to that for different pieces of NetBSD if you want to keep up on what they're doing. The FAQ is a good read for any questions you might still have after watching this. The guide is great to get you acquainted with installing it and everything. And once you get it installed and have been using it for a little bit, the man pages are a good resource. If you don't have access to NetBSD at the moment, you can go on the website and still see the man pages. The wiki is a good resource as well, very similar to the FAQ. Now, if you're running a NetBSD system as a server, firewall, router, or desktop, you want to look at the security advisories because you'll want to patch the source code. And that's all documented, though. But that's how you keep your system secure because this is open source. So because it is, though, their source code is available online, either on their CVS web interface here or on GitHub as well. And you can just git clone with Git at least, git clone and pull down the source code and look through it yourself. And you can even compile it from source, for your systems if you want to. So with that, in the next part, we're going to go out and download NetBSD. So I'll see you there. Okay, so now I have my web browser open and I'm on Google here. We're just going to search for NetBSD, all one word, and then go to the NetBSD project here at netbsd.org. So when we get here, usually, if you look down here, you see NetBSD and then whatever version that is current at the time. So right now it's 8.1, and that was released May 31st this year of 2019. So what you want to focus on here, these are the different CPU architectures. There is all of these, and there's even more. So this can run on lots of different platforms, as we had said. Now, if you have a computer that is probably, let's say, 10 years old, and then, forward from that, you want to choose AMD 64. Again, it doesn't matter if you have AMD or Intel, it will work with both. If you have that single board computer, use ARM. If you have a 10-year-old computer going back to 20-year-old computers from this date, use i386. And if you want to use a CD or DVD, download the ISO file. If you want to put it on a USB stick, choose this one here. But you got to make sure you have the traditional BIOS on your computer there. If you have a newer one, I want to say 2014, 2015, somewhere in there, and forward from that, you probably will have UEFI as your system instead of a BIOS. And then for that, you want to use this image. But for the images, you want to just download them, decompress them, and then write them to a USB stick. About 2 gigabytes is fine. For the DVD, go ahead and put that on a CD or DVD. Alright, but other than that, you basically focus AMD 64 or i386. Same thing with this one here. But of course, systems like that wouldn't have the UEFI, so they don't provide that. So with that though, I'm going to choose AMD 64, the DVD. Okay? We're going to go ahead and save that file. And in this video, I'm going to actually install that in VirtualBox. So feel free to follow me and do that as well. But if you have a real computer, you can install it on that as well. It will pretty much look, and everything I say in the installation part will pretty much apply. So with that though, once that is done, we're going to touch on how to make the media for you. And then we'll get into the installation after that. So, see you there. Okay, so this is what we're going to use to make our media with. I just googled Win32 Disk Imager and then click on the link for SourceForge.net. So the easiest thing to do is just click this download button here. And it should detect that I'm using Windows. I'm on Windows 10 at the moment, but this will work the same all the way back to 7, Vista, and XP. So what we want to do here, we have the installation file. We're just going to save that, and after it downloads, double click on it and install it, and I will join back up with you once I get it installed. So now I've went ahead and put the two files here, the Win32 Disk Imager, and I installed that. And then this is the archive. So again, before we put this on there, because it is gzipped, we're going to extract here, because the GZ is for gunzip in Unix. And that goes ahead and extracts it for us. Alright, and this is what you should have. It does say a disk image file, but this is what's actually meant to be put on a USB. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open that up and get my USB plugged in, and we'll continue there. Okay, my USB is now plugged in, and what we did here is just open up the Win32 Disk Imager, and then under Image File, click Browse, find the IMG file, and do make sure it's the IMG file, not the GZ file, okay? After you've done this, make sure you select the right device that corresponds to your USB drive. Make sure maybe unplug any other hard drives or external hard drives you may have plugged in at the time, just so you don't make a mistake. You can also back up an entire disk with this program. You can do that to back up your files if you want, or you can just highlight them all and copy them off. But all you need to worry about doing is clicking write, and then that will write the IMG file to your USB. And once you've done that, it will be ready to boot up in a real computer and install. But I'm not going to do that at the moment, but that is all you do with that. If you are on Linux at the moment, instead of Windows, you can use the dd command from the shell. You just use sudo dd, the input file is the IMG file, and of course make sure you decompress it first. The output file is the /dev/sdb. Now yours will differ, but basically it's similar to the drive letter here. You just want to use this to mean the whole disk. So when you do this, don't put a number at the end there, because that'll put it on a partition and it won't work right. So to do that, you have to use the entire disk. and then the byte size makes it copy faster. But that's how you do the equivalent thing if you're on Linux. Okay, so now we've booted up NetBSD in our computer, and what we want to do is just boot normally, so we can hit 1 or just hit enter, and it will automatically do it if you just let it boot up there. After it starts up, we will continue with the installation, and what we want to do first, of course, if you need a different language, just select it here. We're going to use English. If you have certain needs for your keyboard, select the correct one, okay? We're going to use unchanged in my case. And we do want to install NetBSD to the hard disk. And this is outlining the procedure. This is fine, so we're going to say yes. And this is the hard drive, WD0, and it's 16 gigabytes. So we're going to hit enter. Very rarely do you have to set the geometry by hand, so this is the correct geometry, is fine. Now, we actually want to use the entire disk, and we're not going to be dual booting, so we're going to say yes here, but if you want to dual boot and use something like Grub or another bootloader like SysLinux or Lilo or something, you would say no. We don't need that though, so we're going to say yes. Now, we are going to use existing partition sizes, and we're going to slow down a little bit here. And what I actually will show you first is that when you do this, there's something you have to pay attention to, which is making a swap partition. So the swap partition is if you run out of RAM and you need a place to store the extra information. So when we first start, we should have whole disk and we should have NetBSD. Now the whole disk is 16 gigabytes, okay? But what we want to do is start at A here. And out of the entire 16 gigabytes, well, after we make the type FFS V1, out of this, we actually want to start this partition or slice at the beginning. So we want to say -1, start at the beginning of the NetBSD part of the disk. After we do that, we want to go down to size, and the amount of RAM you have affects the size of your swap partition. So in this virtual machine, I have 256 megabytes. So I want to double that to 512, just so I have a little extra. But what you want to do is take the size of your disk out and subtract that the amount of RAM amount of swap rather that you want from the main partition. So I've done this already, so this comes out to 15872, and we're going to hit enter there. We do want to format this, so you want to hit enter on new FS, and for mount you want to say yes. For mount point you want to say /. This is where everything of the system will be stored. And then after we've done that, partition size is okay, and hit enter. Now under this, our leftover is 512 megabytes out of this entire disk. So we want to say fs type swap. And interestingly, we do have a shortcut method. We can start this partition at the end of the one we just made, so A in our case. But actually, you can also use -1 if you want it to take up the rest of the disk. I wouldn't recommend it, because if you want to use different partition schemes, so multiple partitions, that won't work for you very well. We're going to use A though at this point, and we're going to hit enter. So you see it starts right after the other partition. So we're going to say partition sizes are fine. Oh, and you have to put size in here, I forgot. So 512. And now we can say they are okay. So now you can see the pattern here. We have 15871, and that's 15872 megabytes in size. That's where everything will be for NetBSD. And then we have, starting just after that, our swap to store extra information. So out of RAM. But that is perfect for what we need. That's plenty of space. You can choose the default name after you hit enter there. At this point, if you made a mistake, say no, but we're all right here. But we're going to say yes. And now it's partitioning and formatting. And this is what makes the changes so NetBSD can use this hard drive. Okay, and once this is done, we'll go ahead and continue. I'm going to go ahead and pause it. Okay, this is where the output of NetBSD booting and where you will log in, so the shell in other words, where it will come out of. If you have to use a serial port, use one of these options. But in most computers, it will be using a monitor with VGA or DVI or HDMI, something like that. So use the BIOS console. So it's kind of confusing. You want to highlight that option and hit enter here, and then say exit. Now in our case, we're going to use a full installation because it gives you the option of installing a desktop environment. If this was a server or firewall, you can use minimal installation or even a custom installation, if you will. So we're going to use full installation in this case. And we're going to use the first option to install from here. And this is installing all the parts of NetBSD now. So we're going to go ahead and pause. And this will take it will take a wide variety of times depending on how fast your computer is. Okay, we are almost through here. So now we're going to hit enter to continue. And be careful here because you may be tempted to just say finished configuring, right? Well, these options save us time before we boot into the system. So we want to configure our network, and we have IBM 0. That's fine. Now, be aware yours could be different, but the procedure is the same. We're just going to let it do auto select, perform auto configuration. If you want to use static, say no here. But if you have a DHCP server on your network, you most likely will. We get an address, and we have our networking set up for us. Okay, and double check yourself up there, but we're okay, so we'll say yes. And this is very important because putting this in Etsy has it set these settings on boot, and we want that. Otherwise, you have to do it every boot again. So say yes there. For time zone, we'll just say America, Anchorage, just as a test, and say exit. If you like the K shell or C shell, you can choose them here, but we're going to use BenSH, which is fine. You do want to set the root password and say yes here. This is the administrator for the entire system. So you want to make sure that password is secure and stays secure. Don't write it down on anything, by the way. This next part is very important for any of that ported software you want to run, whether it be a desktop environment or anything else. What they do is they take the code and they precompile it, and that's what binary packages are because you make a binary out of them. So we're going to say yes for this, so enter. You can also have a chance to configure here as well for your network. We want to install package IN and update the package summary. Now, I highly recommend doing this now. Otherwise, you have to use FTP afterward and install it manually. And it just saves time to do it during installation. And it will take a little bit of time. And if you do have slow internet, it'll take a little longer. Okay, and those are the man pages we've been talking about there. Just hit enter there. And this is really great here with package source if you want to have a way to customize your programs very deeply so you can change how they work. And we will install this now, but most times you don't have to use this program unless you have something that you really know you need to add a feature in that's optional in the program, but it's not built for that feature in the binary package. I've had a lot of times where I've had to put, like for instance with Postfix, that isn't built to read a SQL database by default. So I've had to use the port and compile it from source with that feature included. that would be an example of why you would use this. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pause this. This is quite bigger than package IN. Okay, so once this finishes here, we'll just return there. Okay, these next few things are network daemons that you may or may not want to run. So SSHD allows you to access the shell of NetBSD over any network, including the internet if it's connected to it, or on a local LAN only. But regardless, it's a big target for bots, so I would recommend, unless it's a router, firewall, or server, to leave this disabled. Only turn it on if you know why you need it, okay? So for NTPD, this gives clients the network time that this machine gets. The only time this would be like the most valuable is in high secure environments where you need to make sure clients are eating a certain time and you're trying with things like firewall rules or NAT or something to steer them to this server, all because you don't want your log file timestamps to be skewed and things like that. But for our purposes, we don't have to worry about that, but now you know. We do want this NetBSD to get time though on boot, so we're going to hit enter for NTP date because that's an NTP client. NTPD is an NTP server. This is for DNS discovery. We don't need that, so we're going to say no. This will start your graphical environment like a Fluxbox or Rat Poison or whatever you have on boot. You don't need that for most cases. This is for encryption and decryption of your file system data on your partitions. We can leave it on. It's not hurting anything. LVM is if you want more advanced management of your partitions, and we don't need that in this case. And RAID frame is just for, excuse me, is just for RAID, so you don't necessarily need to turn that off. You can leave it on. It's not hurting anything. Okay, last thing, we want to add a user. So we're going to add T-Tech in this case. Now you want to be part of the wheel group, otherwise you're not going to be able to, you're going to have to log out and log back in directly as root to run anything as an administrator. And this enables us to use the SU command, so we don't have to do that. binsh is fine. Make sure this password is separate from the root account, because if you turn SSH on and that user was compromised, he doesn't have the same password as root, so they can't get into the root account directly. With all that, we're going to say finished configuring, and we're going to hit enter to continue. Now it does restart the installation program. All you have to do is go down to reboot computer, and at this point make sure to take your USB or CD out of the drive, okay? So hit enter and we'll reboot. So I will see you in a second. Okay, we're booted back up and we're going to go ahead and log in as the user T-Tech here. And the reason we had to put ourselves in the wheel group was if we use SU, we can type root's password here. And now, if I do who am I, we are root. But normally, we're just T-Tech. So, what I'll show you here, we can take a look with top at the system resources. It's a good way to judge if you have enough RAM and other things like that, and enough CPU speed and everything. And what we want to do is do df-h. This is a great overview of our disk space. I mean, you can see this is a full installation, and it's only taking up 1.9 gigs on our WD0 disk. And that was that A partition we configured, and that's where slash is mounted. So the main thing you want to at least familiarize yourself with is the package in command. You can just do package update, package in update. Thing is, if you didn't know what to do, use the man command and use the program name after that. So it tells you right here, a tool to manage package source binary packages. And we can see everything we can do with it. If you want to search for a certain feature of what you think the program has, use a // here, and like I think it has the search feature, so we're going to say search, and we can see to use search, we just say package in space search space, and then whatever pattern we're looking for, which is the program name. So an example is, because I know that might not seem clear looking at the man page, package in search, and then something like Xorg, which is for your graphics display. You'll need that for a desktop environment. And if we wanted to install that, use package in install. We'll do Xorg. We can use Xorg CF, any of those. So that's the main idea for this, but that's how you manage the software, okay? And that's how you use the man pages. So again, though, check out those links on netbsd.org for all of that. And let's look around real quick one more time. There is Firefox, but this is what I meant, though. Okay, now they do have Firefox 68. Can find rat poison. Whoops, package search. They're so similar. Sometimes you get them confused. And like, there's your window manager you would install, and things like that. But I was just trying to give you the general idea of how you might use that day to day. With all that though, we have it installed. We're ready to go. We've went from not knowing much about NetBSD to now we have our own system installed. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful. And as always, I'm Tyler with T-Tech, and have a very nice day.